Hi everyone, I'm Amy, this is my wife Maggie, and together we are ThinkerThemer, and welcome back to our 10 out of 10 series where we are attempting to rate every game in our board game collection. 10 games at a time.
It's been quite enlightening, I think.
It
kind of going through, going, oh wow, oh yeah, and also rediscovering games. Like, there's that game. Yeah, it was behind the cobwebs, and we should get this to the table more.
And also realizing that we have a huge shelf of opportunity that we need to also rate in this series. So trying to chip away at that as well. This episode we have a mix of old and new and a broad range of mechanics. So let's get into it, starting with our first game, Gift of Tulips.
Ooh.
Now, Gift of Tulips is a little card game that came out just last year in 2022, and it is from Weird Giraffe Games. And this game is an interesting market simulation style game.
Well,
where
it's the tulips in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
That's probably
But
key.
apparently that is a huge economic market.
And there was, I
tulip
remember there was the
industry.
tulip, the tulip craze, I think it was. It was like tulips were like the Bitcoin at one point, where it was like, this is going to be the investment, and then it was a tulip crash. But anyways, tulips are beautiful. There's a lot of history to it. This is more about just like our bouquets and gifting tulips to other players.
But it does have that economic engine,
Very
because
much.
what you're doing in this game is, if you're familiar with the game Biblios, you are drafting cards or drawing cards from a deck, and then you're deciding what to do with those cards, and you have to do that one card at a time. So you're deciding what to do with the card that you've just drawn before you know the next two cards that you're going to draw and have to do something with. And your options are, you can either influence the tulip market by adding that card to one of the different types of tulips that are down in the central playing area that represents the tulip market. And if you add, if you add a little bit of influence to a type of tulip, it's going to increase in terms of its payout at the end of the game. Or you can keep that tulip for yourself, put it down in front of you as a tableau, and then you are vying for majority of that tulip to get those points at the end.
So those points at the end.
Yeah, so straight away you've got that decision of, do I keep it for myself or do I use it to make the tulips I already have more powerful? And then the final choice that you can decide to do is, you can, as the title suggests, you can gift that tulip.
That's my favorite choice.
You love to give, don't you? But you can give this tulip card to someone else around the table, but it's not altruistic, because you do get some points for doing that. You get more points if the tulip at the time is more valuable.
Of course,
and
you are like, oh my goodness, are you sure you're giving this to me? This is so generous.
This is so generous. This is the top performing tulip at the moment. You're like, no.
You deserve
take this now. I'll influence the market later.
Shift things around when it really counts.
Yeah, because another little sneaky thing you can do is, instead of playing a card to the market face up, you can play it face down into a shuffled pile that adds some flux to the market at the end of the game. So you can be secretly influencing the market as well. Yeah. So that's a basic overview of how the game plays. I enjoyed it. I am a big fan of Biblios, so I love that style of drawing a card and deciding what to do with it before you know what else is coming. But because of that, for me, it was a little bit luck driven. I struggled a little bit to think too far ahead with a strategy, because I didn't know what cards I was going to draw. And when you're trying to influence the market, that kind of frustrated me a little bit. I did
I guess you do have less control. Yeah, absolutely have less control. You don't know what's coming up.
Yeah, I feel like how did you feel about it?
I really enjoyed it. I love the artwork. I love how vibrant the tulips were. We played this with your mom, who loves flowers and really, really loved the cards. So like all the different colored tulips. I actually really enjoyed it, and because you said it's quite similar to Biblios, but the theme, I much more resonate with this than Biblios. So I actually like this more than Biblios. I enjoy myself playing it more. Yeah, I quite enjoyed it.
I liked it too. A little bit too in flux for me, but a really solid filler style game.
I just love the gifting, and I actually feel like I got a lot of points because you get a lot of points throughout the game when you're gifting. And I also love the little trackers, the little tokens that track your points. Even though that's a little bit fiddly, the tracking, because you just get a card where you're tracking your points. But it's like a little like what's that shoe called? The
clog?
The clog or a windmill or a bike.
Yeah, it is really cute, and the production is really beautiful. I gave it a 7.1. As I mentioned, I'm happy to play this anytime. I feel like I have a little bit less control than I do in a game like Biblios for some, and I don't know. But I think it's because I'm trying to influence the market. I'm trying to get something done, and I'm kind of I have to rely on the cards that I'm picking up, or I'm being gifted. So that is Gift of Tulips.
I gave it a 7.7. So
wow.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed it. It's like it's really simple, but I just found it satisfying enough, and I love the gifting part.
Oh, looks like we'll be hanging on to it then.
Absolutely.
That is Gift of Tulips. One on your side.
All right, so we'll move on to the next game, which is a really quirky little game called Dandelions. Is that how you say it? Dandelions?
Dandelions.
Dandelions? No, dandelions. So in Dandelions, you are a dandelion, and you are sort of being blown by the breeze and looking to land, looking for your seed to kind of land in the best possible plot of land. If you, for some reason, if you manage to land on top of another dandelion, actually, no, I just realized why, then you get to move again. So you're going to be, I'll let you probably explain the the actual mechanics of how it works. Or maybe I'll give it a try. You've got these different plots of, the different kind of lands where you could possibly land. And they all have a different value on them. You're going to have all these mini dice that you're going to be throwing in your color, and they're going to represent how far. Well, isn't that you throw dice?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, you throw dice, and what do you call it? It's like throw a dice.
Big. I
roll dice. Roll dice.
Sure.
I'm having an ESL moment. So you're gonna roll your dice, and then every time when it's your turn, you get to decide which of those dice you're gonna pick, and that's going to determine how many steps you're going to be taking with your little cylinder token. If, for example, I chose, a dice number that has a 3 value, and I go 1, 2, 3, and that third step lands on top of another player cylinder token, or someone else's kind of dandelion, I guess, it would then bounce up again and do the entire step count all over again. Wherever you end up landing, that plot has a value, and hopefully, like if you end up there and you have the majority there, then you're going to get the kind of majority scoring, which is going to be based on the value of that
because
spot.
Importantly, where you land is where you leave the dice. So you use the dice to dictate how far you move, and then you drop the dice down on that segment and you leave it there. But what's interesting is if you land in a segment and you drop a dice there, and there are other dice there that have the same value.
Yes.
So for example, the 3, you drop it there and there's other 3s there. You get to pick up all of the 3s and you get to move the one segment across, which means that you can really disrupt other players' area majority, or you can simply move them to a lower valued segment, because at the end of the game, there are 2 types of scoring. The first type of scoring is you score the points for every dice based on the segment that it's in. So you know, if you're on the 5 segment, then each die that you have there is going to be worth 5 points. But then there's also the area majority, and if you get that, you also get the sum of your pips. And so it's a really
quirky, but
quirky game. It's actually
interesting to play.
A Japanese game that Board Game Tables reskinned into this wonderful, delightful theme of dandelions. It's not like hugely thematic. It's quite abstract, but it's just a great theme.
Enough.
It's
I kind of get the bouncing around, and you're kind of floating.
And it is, it's really beautiful. It's an unusual player count. So this game is 2 to 3 players only. So it's been a little bit difficult where we've wanted to play it with more players. So we've had 4 people, but okay, well, we can't play Dandelions. But I actually really just enjoy this game more than it probably mechanically deserves.
It does. It's one of those games that it's like, it's just charming. Like you play, you're like, this is so weirdly kind of simple, but just oddly satisfying.
And it's like weird because it's almost a roll and move. Like you are rolling, but you're rolling a lot of dice at once and then you're choosing which one to activate.
I love how you end up with all those collections of all those different dice. And I feel like I enjoyed the most of the 3-player count.
Yeah.
Because then you have all these 3 different colors and then you're kind of messing around with like, oh, I'm going to make this worth more, make it worth less when you're kind of moving all those dice of the same value. So like very clever.
There's lots of smirking when you move other people's dice. So I really like that. I gave Dandelions a 7.3. A really fun little filler. I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did, but
I liked it more than you apparently. I gave it a 7.6.
Okay, yeah.
That's my
pretty
ready
high
for
score.
Dandelions.
That is Dandelions. So the next game that we're going to play
Are we?
The next game that we're going to play, let's go.
Set it up. Let's do it.
We'll pivot the video. Is Tiny Epic Quest. Now, lots of people would be very familiar with the Scott Alm series of Tiny Epic. This is the only one that we have in our collection, so don't be holding your breath for the comparison to the other games.
And it's a funny story of how it even ended up in our collection. I wonder if any of you that have been following far enough back would know why. We had a whole thing with growing mushrooms at our house, like intentionally, like mushrooms to eat. We had something called Sporegate, now known as Sporegate, where we didn't realize the spores that were being. Anyways, at the time before we realized the spores that were poisoning us, because we were into mushrooms, and it was like, I think it was for your birthday. I was like, oh, I wanted to get something that was like.
We were into mushrooms. It sounds.
Yeah, it does sound. No, like to eat. Cooking mushrooms. I was looking for games that were mushroom themed to give as part of like her present, and this came up like when I was like sort of looking through BGG. I was like, oh, weird. There's no real mushrooms in this. There's like one. Anyway,
why don't you explain what the game
Tiny
is?
Epic Quest.
Not about mushrooms.
It's tiny because it comes in a tiny box. It is epic because this is one of those games where it's so clever how much has been packed into this. You splay it out and you create a full map where you have your heroes who are going to be going on quests. The whole theme of it is this sort of this portal that has opened, and now these goblins are coming to attack, and you're trying to defend the elf village. And so it sort of takes place in 2 phases. There's a day phase and a night phase. So during the day phase, we're going to be doing taking movement with our little meeples and going into, I believe it's like some of them, it's like locations, kind of like temples where you're going to be exploring through it to eventually kind of find a treasure and unlock different tools or weapons and things that would give you more abilities. And so cute, like they're the little the actual tools that you unlock, and it could be like a magic wand or things like that. They attach to the little meeple figure, so you actually have the little meeples moving around holding the items.
I love that.
It's so good.
And some of the items only impact on the meeple that's actually holding the piece, and so it's great. So you choose which one has this item, and then that becomes a special meeple that you can use for some particular purpose. But I really like in this game as well a lot of like dice.
Yes.
rolling.
So I'll finish that bit up. So there's also fighting goblins. So that's the other thing that you can do is go to one of the local kind of goblins and set yourself up for the night phase when the fighting will actually take place. What else can you do? So there's also like the mushrooms. There's like these little mushroom bits, but they don't even look like mushrooms. It's just like a purple thing, and they give you different little kind of abilities. And the other thing is you can go to these monuments to learn spells. So the whole idea is that you can either defeat the goblins or learn a spell to close the portal. So it's like it becomes these different kind of ways or trackers or ways to get points.
Just many different ways to get points. And you can focus because it's quite an interesting scoring scale that each of these things that you're doing has like this cumulative effect, and some of them you need to just do to avoid getting negative points. So that's quite interesting. There are 2 main mechanics that I really enjoy in this game. The first one is that all of the movement is dictated by a public display of cards, and on your turn you are choosing one of those cards, and it impacts all other players. So you're very engaged with what other people are doing because you need to basically play out your actions at the same time. The other thing that I really like is the way that your dice roll. So on your turn, you're going to be rolling dice.
So that's at the night phase. So the night phase is when we do the dice rolling, where it's going to be like what happened with all the locations that you ended up setting yourself in. Like, did you manage to
how many times did you attack a goblin? And like, were you able to make it up the temple that you were working towards? But what I really like is on each individual player's turn, again, the dice influences what happens happens to the other players.
Yeah.
And so I just really like that level of interaction. I like interaction in games. And so there are kind of some things built into the mechanics here where it's not just sitting around waiting for your turn.
But wait, there's more. The other thing that we haven't mentioned is there's also a push your luck element. Because when you're rolling the dice, you kind of get to decide when you stop. You go, oh, actually, I've taken enough damage and I don't want to go bust and make this whole thing not be worth anything if a couple of my meeples were actually able to do some good things. So I'm going to hold, and then the rest of the table can keep kind of rolling dice. So there's that, or you go, oh, I think I can make it, and hopefully we won't get too many like attacks from goblins. So there's also a push your luck element. So there's so much packed.
There is so much
in this.
It is tiny and it is epic. But for me, it sits in a bit of a weird place. I do enjoy my time with this game. If you were to set it up, I would happily sit down and play it. It's just that I always have a mixed relationship with these lots of game in a small box, because if there's so much in it, then I'd almost rather set up a full Euro and have that experience. And, when I think of a small box game, it's something I want to grab, teach really quickly, like play really quickly, whereas this is a much longer experience. But if you're looking for something that's easy to pack and take somewhere with you and then have a full game experience and not take up too much luggage space, this is a great option. I gave it a 7.3.
I gave it a 7.8 because it also plays great solo. Like it has, I didn't even talk about the solo mode. It's got a very like straightforward solo mode. Again, it's sort of like a beat your own score. Not beat your own score. You actually do have goals of score to reach, and it's quite tough. And so I still feel like there's so much more game or puzzle for me to crack in there.
There you go.
So that's Tiny Epic
Maggie's
Quest.
Tiny Epic Quest solo. There we go.
Next one. Should we go over here?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, so we go the smaller boxes first. The next game is called No Thanks.
No thanks.
Thanks.
If you've been watching recently, Maggie has been talking about this game a lot. But
like,
mostly,
why would you just get it?
Mostly because I had never played it, and she's like, "You're really going to enjoy this game." And so we had to pick up a copy over Christmas. We got this to take to family Christmas.
Yes, I actually was taught this at a board game barbecue day because it was just set up on a table, and it was one of those like we're kind of going around. We just finished playing a game, and this like really lovely friend was like, oh, I can teach you, do you have 2 minutes? Like, do you have 5 minutes? We'll play No Thanks. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. It was set up, and it was a mix of adults, and we have even like 2 kids on the table, and we had such a great time, and it's so simple. How does it play?
In this game, you are basically on your turn going to be drawing a card from the top of a deck. This card is generally a card that you don't want because it has a number on it, and that number, if you are going to be the person who takes this card, is going to give you points at the end of the game, and in this game you do not want points because the person with the lowest amount of points is going to win. Really easy concept. However, in order to get rid of that card that you've just drawn, you need to place a token on top of it. And basically do that, place it on top, and say no thanks and slide it to the next person. And now the next person in turn order looks at that card and has a think about whether they want to take that card, because if they do take that card, it's going to, as I mentioned, be points which you don't want, but you also get to take the token or tokens that have been placed on that card before it got to you. And that's really important because your tokens are finite. And if you run out of tokens, well, then you're going to be taking a lot of cards, and those cards could be a 30 value instead of a 5. So do you take that 5 and take the tokens and be happy that that was the compromise that you made? But if you don't want the card, you have to place another token on it, and it keeps moving around. And what's actually really interesting about this game is the little twist. Well, there's 2. One is that each of the tokens is worth -1 point at the end of the game. So essentially, if you're taking a card that has a lot of tokens on it, well, those are not only useful to get you through other rounds of the game, but also they are going to be worth -1. So effectively, I'm taking a card that has 4 on it, but it's got 3 tokens on it. Effectively, it's only a 1. So maybe I will take it now. But the other really interesting thing is once you collect that card, it goes down in front of you and you start to create runs of cards. So if I have a 10 and then unfortunately I have to take a 9, or I just decide I want to take a 9, I get to place it on top of the 10, and now it's only going to count as 9, not 10, because the 10 is effectively just sliding in under that 9. Likewise, if I was to come across an 11, I could very easily take that 11 because I can just slide it behind my 10 and it's not doing anything for my points at the end of the game.
One extra point, but it's like, that's not
No, it's no extra points.
Oh, yeah,
because
true.
it
Yeah,
goes
the 11's behind.
yeah.
Yeah, so the 10 is still going to be the one that counts.
However,
yeah.
that would be the nice thing to do in this group because nobody else wants the 11 and I can make it disappear. But instead, I'm going to put a token on it and send it around so that it collects a whole heap of tokens before it comes back to me, and then I will take the 11. So it's just a hilarious game of really forcing
so simple, but
forcing
so
your
good.
opponents to take cards they don't want and not saving them when you have the
And also
opportunity
going,
to do so.
Do they even have any tokens left? I don't think you have. They're like, oh, I think they only got one. They only got one, and then like another. So yeah, it's just.
And there's only one of every card too, and some cards are removed from the deck, and
Yes.
so you are really pushing your luck if you think you can take a run of cards and get it down to a manageable score. Maggie was entirely right. I really did love this game. I think it's such an easy, quick game to teach, and one that is really like just brings people together.
So
We played it a lot over Christmas.
So fun.
We had my mum and all of her neighbours come over, and we played this game. It was a big hit. They went out and bought it. Yeah,
when we got them to rank all the games that we played, they were like, that would be number one.
A great filler. Yeah,
so clever.
Super fun. I'm looking forward to taking it into work as well. I just think it would be a great like lunchtime
No theme
style game.
And
no theme.
And I was the
No
one that was like,
thanks, no
this
theme.
is yeah,
No
it
theme,
was
no
so
thanks.
good. So I shouldn't love this game, but I really resonate with it. Yeah.
I gave it a 7.6. A solid filler. Love a party game. So I love fun.
I gave this an 8.
No,
I love this game.
I know, but it's
just
so
no theme whatsoever, and yet I'm just like, I just always find myself giggling and just delighted.
well. Now you can't say that you don't like fun.
I know.
This is pretty fun.
It is. I get.
It's,
yeah,
it's fun.
It's the one that
Don't try and talk your
broke,
way out of it.
It broke the. It broke the curse, or it broke the streak.
So I guess this is going nowhere in our collection because finally there's a party game that I can take to a gathering that Maggie won't be like,
absolutely.
I'll sit this one out.
I'll always play this one.
Yeah.
So good.
So that is
Love
no thanks.
Never win. I never win, by the way, and I don't care.
The next game, and so we're moving into some bigger heavier
boxes.
games. So this is Witchstone, which came out in 2021 and was a game that was extremely highly reviewed. And it's just been sitting on our shelf of opportunity, and I have been staring at it, wanting to play it for so long because of all the positive reviews. It is a Reina Knizia game, and obviously, you know, he creates a lot of board games.
A lot of games, yes.
And so I was really interested to see how this puzzle would play out. In this game, you are playing as different witches, and you are basically, you've got a cauldron in front of you, which is a puzzle board. And on this puzzle board, you're going to be placing double hex tokens. And at any given time, you have 5 to choose from behind a hidden player screen. You also have a supply of them, and every time you use one on your cauldron, you're going to be revealing a new one, and the game continues until everyone's played out all of their hexes. But what do the hexes do? Well, when you place them down into your cauldron, they're going to activate the 2 actions that are shown on either end of this hex tile. However, the really fun thing is if they're touching other previously placed tiles or parts of the cauldron that have the same symbol on them, then you're going to be able to activate that action more times. So
Cluster activation.
yeah, it is. So you have this cluster of actions, and you're like, wow, now I get to activate the witch icon like 6 times. Amazing. Watch me go. And there are many different things that you need to get done using this action selection tile placement system. You are playing on a puzzle board that is essentially a network. And what you're trying to do is create different chains that are going to provide a pathway for your witch to move around to different areas on the board. You are going to get points for basically making full paths, for moving your witch around to different areas. You're going to be able to reach different bonuses that are going to give you more actions that you can get done. There is a pentagram in the corner, and one of the actions is to move around that pentagram, and you get tokens of different values. There's this whole shelf system. There's this magic wand that you're moving along that allows you to do scoring.
Another track.
Another track.
Yeah.
But basically in this game, it's a combo-oriented game. So what you're trying to do is take an action, and then you're trying to multiply that action, and then that allows you to grab a bonus, that allows you to do something else, that allows you to do something else. And so you're just trying to do that chain reaction, and is a very abstract game of
Yes.
thinking through the different symbols and what you're going to get done and what you want to prioritize. There are also cards that you can draft that are going to make your spells actions more powerful in an ongoing way. In a one-off way, actually.
Or give you end of game bonuses.
Or end
points.
of game bonuses, that's right. And so there's a lot going on, but it is actually quite simple to get your head around because there's only a finite number of actions and symbols. The iconography is really strong. And it's just this abstract puzzle where you're just trying to do a better job of it than everybody else.
They describe it as these domino hex tiles, which is I guess that's what it is. So you've got these two actions, and it's interesting to then see, you end up, I find myself really trying to focus on what clusters do I want to create so I can get best kind of bang for action every time.
Yeah.
But then you end up with a little hex tile, domino hex, where you're like, oh, I really want to activate this, but I also want to activate the other side, but now I've got the cluster all the way to the other end, so it's going to be kind of wasted. So I enjoy that part.
I really enjoyed the puzzle.
That it never felt thematic. It was a fairly abstract. These are all the different tracks, and these are all the different kind of things that could trigger one another.
Yeah. I gave Witchstone a 7.2, which is a little bit lower for this style of big box game that I love. But basically, I really enjoyed my time with it. We played it a lot, and we played it a lot with my sister. Had a great time playing it. It was a kind of a tense race. I wasn't very good at it, but that's not why I gave it a lower rating. I just found it quite forgettable. So it was really fun, the time that we had with it, but after we put it away, it hasn't been a game that I've thought about, that I've wanted to get off the shelf, or that I think does anything particularly unique that makes me excited to teach it. So
I agree. I think it's a good solid game. The meat is there, but I agree. For some reason, it didn't stick. It's a 7.3 for me. That would be my score. And I really like the aesthetic. I love the witch meeples. They're so cute.
They are cute.
And I love the concept of the hex. But I agree that overall, I'm like, I finished playing. I'm like,
that's fine.
Okay.
It probably doesn't need to stay in our collection.
No, we can probably move that one on.
So that is Witchstone. And
which way? Let's
now,
go this way.
The next
The
game.
next one is Iberian Gauge. So Iberian Gauge is our first kind of attempt or foray into the 18xx in a very, very newbie-friendly way. This is like an intro into...
It's a cube rail game with some 18xx elements. I believe, and I say that because we've never played an 18xx game still. So in Iberian Gauge, it's all about, you have all these different rail companies, and so you are investing in these rail companies to get shares in those companies. Those shares are going to be worth money at the end, but as you're investing in these train companies, it's giving those companies money to then build rails and build kind of like their rail network, connect these different cities. As you're connecting cities, that's helping with paying, with the dividends that you're going to get, which is going to be obviously your income throughout different rounds. But also, the more connections that you make, then the more you're going to be, the more valuable that share or that company is going to be. And so at the end of the game, that's going to be raising the stock price. So at the end of the game, you're going to kind of cash that out in a way. And whoever ends up having the most money or the highest value overall will win. In terms of how it actually plays, again, the turns are fairly... The turns themselves are fairly straightforward in that you're either doing the investing bit or you're doing when you're kind of buying, acquiring shares, or you're building. So it's the turn for those companies to build those rails. And potentially if they can't, they can, if they can either build a brand new rail network or they can lease from another company. So I found that ultimately, the thing that makes it more tricky is just the maths that you're doing and keeping track of, so does this come from the company's money? Is this money going from the company to the bank or from the bank to us? Yeah, it's an interesting game because there's a lot of tension in the fact that there are limited shares available for each of the companies.
Yes.
And as a train appears to be making good progress, and you can see that
jump
it's
on it.
about to hit some towns and it's probably going to get a lot of money and its dividends are going to go up, then everybody wants to get in on that train. train action. And so it's frustrating when you don't get an opportunity to buy shares in a train and everybody else around the table is, getting these big dividends and these payoffs and you're like, oh, why didn't I get in on that train earlier?
Back this company?
And also I love the dynamic of when you're like, I tell you, this train is going to do well, and you're trying to sell it to other people so they buy shares in, or when they do buy shares, you're like, you've made a great decision. That we're going to go far together. And then you kind of are cooperating to work together to make the the shares that you both have an interest in do well. And so there's this really fun dynamic of working together with different players around the table, because it depends on who's purchased shares in that company. But then there's also this interesting dynamic of tanking shares, which is something that I realized, we were working together very well, and then at some point I realized that my only way to win a game that we were playing was really to burn to the ground.
Sabotage one of the companies. You had some shares.
I had a minor share
but it's a minor investment overall when compared to the other companies.
When other people had more shares in that company, and so I was like, you know what? This train is going to nowhere. I'm going to build a road to nowhere, and you're not going to be able to connect to a city. And what an interesting dynamic in this game is every round, every train has to make it to a new city or town. And if you don't, then its share value decreases by the number of players that have shares in that company. And that is that's how you can create the demise. And so this is a game that's not going to work for everybody. I'm not even sure if it works for me, honestly. I really enjoyed so many elements of it, because I think it's given me a hint that I'm really going to enjoy other games of this type, because I love the economy of it. I love buying shares, I love the dividends, I love the economics of how some companies are worth more, or all of that. We really enjoy that in the game. However, this game, there's so little that you're doing on your turn that it feels like it's constantly an admin. There's just so much admin in this game.
And the money exchange, because it's so much and so frequent. You just feel like you're spending the whole time just exchanging.
And the denominations were, I don't know, they just weren't easy to work with. I'd recommend using some iron clays or something with this game, because it was just super fiddly.
Poker chips. So it's iron clay poker chips? Yeah, okay, because I wouldn't know what iron clay was. So poker chips. Okay,
obviously a lot of people who are into 18xx will already have those on hand, but that's something that we should probably invest in if we're going to get more into these types of games. And the other dynamic is that in order to do well at this game, I do think that there's an element of having to be mean. If you don't like that, then this is probably not going to shine, because that's where it really is going to shine.
Well, I enjoyed my experience with it when we were not being mean, and in fact, when we started to be mean, I enjoyed it less. So it's a kind of game. But
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so it's the kind of game that I would play.
Exactly what I just said.
It's almost like if we have a good agreement around the table that we're not going to be nasty for a second.
No agreement.
So you can still, you
got to do what you gotta do.
And I'm happy to be corrected, but it's that's the one bit that doesn't make a lot of thematic sense to me. Why would you be invested in a company to try and tank it? You would just de-invest.
I've got more investments otherwise.
Yeah, but it's this company. Oh, maybe I guess if it's a really finite market, where it's only if this company tanks, this company is improving. Anyways, so that's the one bit that I'm I don't resonate with it as much.
But the problem is the game is set up in order to be mean. That is the way, that is a lever that you can use, and your friends might use it. So if you're not into that, then probably
be prepared
avoid
that it could happen. What's your rating?
Oh, my rating. I totally forgot. My rating is 7. When I'm talking about it, there are so many elements that I really like about it. I just felt like I'm not going to get it to the table because there's so much admin. And even when we think about, we have friends over, I'm like, should we get Iberian Gauge out? It's no, I don't think they could. I don't think they'll enjoy the admin of it. So it doesn't get to the table as often as I wish it would. But it has been a nice segue into other train games.
I really enjoy this. This is 7.6 for me.
Oh wow, you are so much higher in the ratings today.
I am. But also, I just love this economic sort of type stuff. It reminded me of not that it's the same game, but it's that economies of the money exchanging Magnate First City, which again in that one there's a lot of admin with the money, but it's there's that paper money that is super satisfying. So
I think you're going to like 18xx.
I think so too.
I think so.
We'll see.
Should
we go to your side?
Yeah, sure. So this is Bus. And Bus are, I just smile when I look at this game. Bus is a splotter game, and we are a fan of splotter games. A lot of people aren't. They tend to be complex games that you can make a mistake early in the game and then get splotted, is what they call it, when you can't really recover and you have to play out this whole game thinking about what you did wrong.
And staring at your mistake, chained to it and not being able to do anything about it.
And they can be a little mean. Bus is an interesting game because it is by far the simplest splotter game that we have played.
Yeah.
It has an extremely low rules overhead that you can teach incredibly quickly. And then when you're playing, the concept is really simple. There are a whole heap of worker placement actions, and these... I was just thinking that it kind of reminds me a little bit of Dominant Species, actually, in the worker placement.
Yes.
Anyway, but there are worker placement spots. And the interesting thing about this game, though, is you have a finite number of workers for the entire game. And so every time you use a worker, that worker is discarded from the game. And what's interesting is that in every round of Bus, you get to decide when you stop putting workers out. And so you have this constant dilemma of, do I just like put one more worker out this round, or do I save it? Because if you run out of workers, you are just sitting there watching the rest of the game play out. You have no more turns, and there could be more and more rounds at the end of the game that you're just not involved in. So that is the first really interesting thing about Bus.
You're wise about spending your workers.
But the next interesting thing about Bus is that the worker placement spots have an order in which you place out the workers, which is sometimes the reverse order of how they play out. And what's interesting about that is, I'm not going to go into it in too much detail, but basically you can end up with a worker that's placed in a spot that doesn't get to activate the action.
Splottered.
You got splotted.
Right there.
Yeah. Which means that you can see the writing on the wall. That's like, well, there's so many workers in that spot now that the first worker I put out there is now going to be ineffective, and it's just going to be discarded from the game, and it's wasted. So should I put another worker in that spot to now be ahead of everybody else?
Chase your losses.
Yeah, and so there's this tension of like trying to save your workers, but then also needing to use them based on how much everybody else is using their workers. So there's this interesting like worker economy in this game that as other people are using more workers, you're forced to use more workers too. And I really like that. But what are you trying to get done in this game? You are trying to build out a bus network, and you have basically people in this town. They belong to everybody. They're communal. And you're going to have to build a bus network around the two main train stations in town to be able to take people home, to work, or to the pub. And those are the three main locations. And those locations are also going to be placed out by players onto the board. And hopefully you'll have the right locations on your network. But what's interesting is the way that first, there's two things that are interesting. One, turn order will dictate who can take the workers to the place that the people to the place they're trying to go first. So you can steal all of the available passengers before anybody else.
Once they've been taken to the place that they want to go, that's it. They're done.
They're like, I'm not.
They don't need to go anywhere else.
I'm just going to one pub and I'm going to sit here. So you can steal the passengers. And the second interesting thing you can do is you can freeze time.
Why? Why not?
Because why not in a bus game? You can every round the type of place that passengers want to go to changes unless someone decides to stop time. It costs you a victory point to stop time, but it can really mess with everybody else's game. Just like in classic Splotter style, there's that element of disruption of other people's strategy. And it's just, this game is so easy to teach. It plays up to 5 players, and it plays in around an hour. It says 2 hours on the box. We haven't found that to be the case at all.
No, it's fairly quick.
It's really
the higher
quick.
player counts.
Yeah, maybe we're burning through too many workers. But
maybe, I think, you could have AP-prone players where, like, there's that analysis paralysis where it could push it longer.
Yeah, no,
but there's not that many actions.
There's not that many actions.
It's like, and some actions only have space for one worker. So it's like if you missed out.
Like turn order. And it's so important. important to
and the
get
extending your kind of bus capacity as well. So and that's the other that's the other thing. It's such an interesting thing of like everything is dependent on like the number of times you get to do something is dependent on the largest bus capacity. It's so
there's lots
quirky.
of interesting dynamics at play here. It is a classic for a reason. I gave bus 8.1.
Holy
and
moly.
I doubt that yours is that high.
Mine is way lower. Why? Because this is a game that is like I can see how clever this is. Like, it's just so simple, so streamlined, and it's all there. But I do not enjoy myself playing this game.
Yeah.
I really dislike having to waste turns or all of a sudden setting everything up, and then by the time you got to take your turn, you're like, oh, I actually can't take anyone anywhere, so I guess I don't do
Someone
anything.
has karate kicked your sandcastle over. It's the classic Maggie dislike of people interrupting your plans.
For that reason, it's a 6.7 for me.
6.7?
Yes. And again, I don't think it's a bad game. I think it's an excellent game. It's just not at all a game for me. Like, it's one of those, like, I see it, I'm like, nope, play it with somebody else. I'm not playing that.
That's going to be one of the largest gaps in games in our collection, I think. Okay.
You're in shock.
I am in shock.
We might need to pause the recording.
I'm in shock.
Get you a glass of water.
Blockus? I can't remember. But this is another game that I'm like, let's just play Bus because it's so easy to teach. I can teach it
and I'm
like without even having to reread the rule book.
And
it plays lots of players. And Maggie's like, I'm just going to go do something else. So that's fair.
I'll play a solo. I'll learn another. I'll read through a rule book. I'll learn something else. So everybody wins.
Well, sorry, but I'm not getting rid of it.
No, that's fine.
I believe it's out of print, but hopefully it will come back soon.
Yeah.
Next.
All right. Next one is Come Together. Now, Come Together I love this theme. So it's all about kind of Woodstock Music Festival in the late 60s, early 70s. And it's deceptively, like, it kind of looks like, this is going to be like a fun, light, so it's like, no, it's actually a really crunchy, really interesting worker placement game where you're going to be trying to put together the best acts, like music acts, and then you want to make sure that you have enough tents for your concert goers to attend, attract the right type of concert goer, because all the different, and there's so many meeples in this game, all these different color meeples, and that all represents the music taste that all these kind of individuals like, and so you're kind of trying to match the attendee or the festival goer to the concert that you're going to be putting them on, attract the acts, and make sure that you have enough stages to have to kind of showcase them, and then even the stages can have these sort of like adjacency kind of bonuses of like concession stands and food, and so all of that's going to give you points. The key thing of this is when you're placing out your workers, though, to bring all these things onto your kind of little player board, you're not actually getting to take the action at that point. And the key thing with this is that you're kind of like placing yourself, kind of going, okay, so that's going to mean that I'm going to get to take that act or take that stage or that, sort of tent spaces. But then it's when someone decides to spend their turn to bring back workers activates an area. So it activates an area where every player that's placed in that area gets to take their cards, but also the more players that are there, then the more powerful that the action for, or like these sort of tracks that you have that will also kind of give you different bonuses. So the more powerful that action is going to be. So that's why it's Come Together, because you're like, come over here. Like, if you're there, you kind of want that to activate a really high value.
And also, if there's more people there, then you assume someone's going to activate it because they want it to pay off.
To activate.
So I'm going to get in on that action and go there. I wasn't going to, but that makes sense that I should go there.
Yeah. So super clever, very crunchy in the decisions that you're making, and
and also the attention of having to house all of the festival goers in tents, and the way that you build out that collection of tents, that's really fascinating as well. I love in this game, and we've talked about it before on the channel.
One of those games it takes a little while to set up.
Hold on, I haven't said what I loved.
What do you love about it? Sorry, I'm so excited.
The acts, they all have names. So all of the bands have names that are taken from different board games. There are play on words with different games, and I just love it. You can see some of them on the back here, like the Dixits. There's Sushi Go, like Sushi Go. There's Chuckmate. So they're all kind of a play on gaming terms, which I really
either games or gaming related sort of puns. It was a surprise and a delight for me, and I love the theme. So I'm gonna give this an 8.5.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it made your top 10 games of
It did.
2022, so
Yes.
I'm not surprised. For me, it's a 7.7. I really enjoyed this game. I thought it was an interesting play on worker placement. Some of the things that I like a little bit less is just that it takes up so much table space.
It really does. You need a big
So much
space,
table
a big
space.
table to play it. Yeah.
And also, it says 60 to 90 minutes on the box. I feel like it's longer than that, or it feels longer than that. I really enjoy it when I play it, though, and obviously it's staying in our collection because Maggie loves it so much. And, 7.7 is still a really high score for
Love
me.
this game.
It was a surprise and a delight of last year.
It really was.
That is come together.
Gonna go there? Yeah.
Yeah, why not there?
All right, so the next one is Encyclopedia. So this is a game that we backed on.
I backed in all of its deluxe glory.
Yes.
So the full premium package of Encyclopedia, we talked about it on Backchat, and it was delivered not too long ago, I think just at the end of last year. And this one has been getting incredible reviews all across the board. But in this game, if you don't know anything about it, you are trying to put together an encyclopedia by traveling the world and discovering different species.
Documenting, so I think it's like a predecessor to Darwin. So it was like the 1700s, and like kind of, is it like the Comte de Buffon? I'm probably kind of butchering that, but it's like you're sort of being sponsored to go out and document all these different species in all these different exotic lands, and then publish your findings of all these different, the mammals and the terrains that they're in, or the type of stuff that they eat, or so that's in a nutshell what thematically
you're doing. And then the way that it works mechanically is dice worker placement. So at the start of every round, everyone is going to be drawing 4 dice out of a bag and rolling them, and then they get to choose where they place them in front of them on a number of spots that are going to be available for you to use to place them out onto the board, or other players to use. So other people can use the dice that you've rolled. They don't really belong to you. But if they do use one of your die, then you're going to get some kind of benefit. Maybe you get a couple of coins. Maybe you get a couple of victory points. So 3 victory points. So there is this kind of first question of, where am I going to take a die from, and am I willing to give someone else a benefit so I can
even
get
before that, where am I going to place my dice?
Dice.
Because it's like, if I want someone to take this one and give me some victory points, it's like,
Yeah, and then so on your turn, you're choosing a die, and then you're placing it out onto the board into a number of different spots that are all quite thematic. So you can go out and you can discover, first of all, these different species. And to do that, you have to have a die that has a matching color to the card of the animal species that you want to recruit and bring over to your tableau. So that is one of the actions you can do. Another is that you can go and get I believe it's the help of a scholar.
Yeah, so you're going to
and
you have to get experts. Yeah, so you're getting experts in different continents.
And so these cards are going to give you ongoing benefits, or sometimes an endgame scoring goal, and they go in front of you on your player board, and they can get stored there in piles, but only the ones that are on top of those piles are going to be active at any one time. And then once you've collected these species, you then want to go out, and I don't know what that's called.
That's the actual exploration. So you first kind of collect them. It's almost like you're like, ooh,
I'm going to go spot that one.
Yeah, so it's like these are the ones that I'm interested in studying, and then you actually take the exploration, or the expedition, I think is actually what it's called, where you go to that continent. So that's where you're also having to link the dice color to the continent color that you're going to.
But what you're trying to do is you're trying to pay to place cubes on these different species that you have in front of you. And then once you've done that, you can use these cubes to publish. So then the final action is really to go, the final major action is to go and publish. And then you get to remove these cubes. And what's interesting is you have to choose a species that's going to be the focus of that publication. And then you're allowed to take the cubes off that particular species, but then also any other species that you have that has cubes that match back to I'm really struggling thematically.
It's like a category or an element. So, like, for example, what they eat or their habitat. So it could be like, these are other carnivores that I've also researched that I have cubes on, or these are other ones that are in a rainy sort of habitat.
Yeah. So this game, you're essentially just trying to get more victory points by the end of the game. Look, I'm struggling with the thematic description of this game because actually this game never quite came together for me. It's a game where it's been compared to Wingspan. I don't understand that comparison at all, aside from that there's species, but the game feels entirely different. And the game involves, like, to me, even though there's thematic terms that are kind of have been, I wouldn't say pasted on, but definitely assigned to each of these different areas, I don't think about it very thematically. As you can tell from my description, it's very much a do this, cash that in. Do this, do this,
I agree
cash
that even
in.
though, like, I think, like, when I see it, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense why you're getting that thing on that area. When I actually am playing it, it just becomes symbols, cubes, and colors.
Yes.
And that's all that's kind of present.
Exactly.
The theme just, and then, like, so it's like, I like the illustrations, I like the artwork in it. I like the illustrations in the cards. But then it's like, even if I think of like Wingspan, one of the things that I love about Wingspan is each one of those cards, they actually have a powerful action that relates to, you have a fact about the bird, and here you only have the Latin name for the animal.
But that's what I think leads to the abstraction of the theme as well, is that the Latin name is used for each of the species. So you're not like, oh yay, I just got this something flamingo from this area, and that's really exciting. It's because it's like, oh, I'm not quite, I can kind of guess what that is based on the image, but I don't quite know.
I also I don't necessarily learn anything about, because there's no fact or anything about it. So not that there needs to be, but I just sort of like because the comparison has been made, I'm like, I wonder. And then the cards themselves don't have any inherent powers. They just have like essentially symbols of categories that they fall under. That then you're like, oh, okay, so then I can group these categories, and then when I'm publishing that category, like then I can kind of activate that, and get points for that. But that's as far as it goes. And the categories are like, well, none of them are different. They're just different symbols. It's not like they behave differently or anything like that.
And then mechanically, I just find this a really interesting game, and this is going to be probably a fairly unpopular opinion, so brace yourself. But, but I feel as though there are better gateway games that don't have as much complexity in terms of the scoring, because there's quite a lot of maths involved in this game. There's a lot of fiddly scoring rules, in my opinion, that are hard to maintain in your head because it's not entirely thematic in the scoring, the way that it scores. And then on top of that, if you want a more crunchy, tight gaming experience, this is also not that. And I think that's part of the reason why it doesn't work for Maggie and I, is because we like a really almost punishing worker placement style game, that it's like everything feels finite, you're like battling. But in this game, there's a lot of ways to mitigate against the things that you can't do. There's always coins that you can use, or the expedition tokens that you can use
to change the color with color token.
So it always feels like there's something you can do, and for that reason I don't feel particularly invested in what I'm doing. And so it's a strange one.
Well, I'm going to say, it's like, this is interesting, especially compared to Boss, which we just covered, because what I don't like about Boss is that you can have turns where it's like, well, that was all wasted and I get nothing for that. This one, it's like, it's the opposite, where it's like this, because you always have something, and it's so like, it's sort of taken the tension out of that completely. So I kind of, like, this is what I'm trying to figure out. I like something a little bit in the middle, where it's like, it's not completely wasted, but it's literally not like, well, I can pretty much do everything and there's no real consequence. Or I think the only time there's a bit of a tension is when you have a finite number of, like, the animals, for example, that you can get, or the cards. They don't replenish during the round, so it's like, oh, if I really wanted an animal and someone took it, it's like, so. But aside from that, it's very low tension the whole way through, which is what a lot of people really connect with this.
That's what I was going to say. A lot of people are going to love that,
because it's a lot more relaxing than like like the thinky elements of it they're not heavy. Like they're just like, oh, okay, well, the heaviness is just in the math of the.
I think it's not heavy, but to me it doesn't have a nice flow to it that makes it easy for new gamers. But so many people disagree with that statement.
Absolutely, so it's like every game has,
and we didn't just play it. We didn't just play it once and then be like, you know what, we don't like this game. We played it because there were so many great reviews of it. We were like, what are we missing? Let's go over the rule book again, play it again, play it again, play it again. and just every time I did not enjoy myself with it. But that's
and this is not saying that it's a bad game.
No.
It's not a bad game. It's
not
just
one
like
for
we
us.
didn't connect with it.
And that's why we have games for everybody.
Exactly.
I gave
Let's give
this
it.
a 6.6. It's not a game that I connected with, and it won't be staying in our collection.
I give it a 6.9. So
Okay.
a 6.9 for me. So again, I don't think it's a bad game. It's just like I just didn't resonate.
There are many games in our collection that other people would not like. So
Absolutely.
this is why we do this. And this is so you can get to know our
Exactly.
taste better. So we have to be transparent about what we like and we don't like.
Yeah.
And the final game that we'll
Last
talk
one.
about today is a big one. This is also a 2022 release called Mosaic, A Story of Civilization. What you're seeing here is the retail edition. So I know there's this huge Kickstarter edition that if you have it has full miniatures and the works, but we have not played that edition. We've only played the retail edition, so we can only speak to what works and doesn't work about this particular edition, so bear that in mind. But Mosaic is a really interesting civ builder, and the reason why it's so interesting, and I think why it's been getting so much love, is because your turn is so simple. You only get to do one thing on your turn, and that is simple as spending some money to get a card, or producing something on one of your production tracks.
Your kind of income tracks, I think they
And
call
so
them.
your turn your turn is just over like this. Like it moves around the table, and you can have so many people playing this game, up to 6 players, and the turns themselves are very, very fast. And what you're trying to do in this game, there's 2 main things that you're trying to do. The first thing is that, like terraforming Mars style, you are trying to build up a tableau of different symbols that are going to allow you, that represent different areas of your civilization, that are going to enable you to be able to build other things. So primarily technologies that will give you actions, but then they'll also give you more symbols, so you feel like you are building up to something, because you start with very little and then you end up with a million cards
so
many symbols.
Now, the thing with that is like it's not a million cards that they all have an action on them. Like usually it's like most of them activate at the time that you get them, and then after that it's just the icons. Some of them do have an ongoing power, but it's not like an overwhelming. It's like a lot of them, but it's not overwhelming.
You're basically displaying them so you can see their symbols. Yeah. And then the second element of this game is that you are trying to play an area control game. So there is a map of the world, and on this world there are resources that you're going to be able to pick up if you build cities and towns out into different countries around the world. But the other thing is that when an empire scoring occurs, it's going to score more points if you have area majority in those areas by way of having cities and towns built there, by putting your military out there, and by building the wonders of the world and owning the wonders of the world in that area. So it's really interesting because you're simultaneously trying to build up your engine and your tableau, and then you're also keeping an eye on what's happening on the board, because you don't know when an empire scoring is going to happen. So there are a number of different decks on the board that represent different things you can do: tax and tariff, innovations, buildings, and population. And when they are turned over, somewhere shuffled into the kind of end of those decks is going to be an empire scoring card, and then on the third empire scoring, the game will have an end game scoring and then come to its completion. And the reason why I'm talking about so much detail about how the scoring works is because that is this game. I don't even know where to start with this game. First of all, let's talk about the mechanics. I really, really liked the mechanics of this game.
I really enjoyed the process of this game and the kind of building up your civilization, and the fact that you start with a leader that kind of gives you a particular inclination. So you might be, like artist. So you're going to be more prone to ideas, which is the currency that you use to develop technologies. And so it comes with a particular symbol, and they all have unique. Yes. So there's that element.
And what I loved about that is that the asymmetric leaders, they're not, like, I don't tend to like asymmetric player powers, but they're so simple in that they give you a little head start in a number of different areas. And actually that does have a profound impact on the way that your civilization develops, because, you've got more of those symbols, which means that you're more likely to take cards that relate to that. And unbeknownst to you, that subtle change in starting resources and things is having a big impact on the way your game plays out. I really appreciate that. It's pretty clever.
And I love this concept of you have this production board that then you kind of, depending on how far away you've moved those trackers, whenever you trigger a production, that it was also linked to like the number of population that you have plus that production. And so it's like, oh, there's an incentive to move up like my stone production, for example. But then if I don't have enough people, it's like, oh, I can't, build cities. So it's like, well, maybe I need to get more people. Oh no, but I need food to get those people. So I should bring up. So it's got one of those like interdependencies and things. But there's plenty of time in the game to bring.
But also another thing. One other thing that I want to talk about that I really like is that Arc Nova terraforming Mars style of collecting symbols. I think that works, equally well in this game. It's really great. The main problem that we have with this game is it's fabulous for the first 70% of the game. At that point, everybody around the table, we've played this so many times, and at that point, it just gets... we just want it to end. And it just goes on for too long. And the reason why it goes on for so long, and particularly at a 2-player count, it's just when will this...
It's just at any player count. I felt like even at the higher player counts, we were like...
But particularly at 2...
It became a co-op at the end where we were like, how do we work together to bring about the end of the game? Deplete the... And it's not because it's not a good, fun game. It's just, it's like your fun kind of reaches a point where you're like, well, now I've kind of achieved everything that I wanted to achieve. And now it just starts to like take away the tension. Like,
and instead of focusing on your own game, you're just focusing on the things that are going to end the game because you want to have that final delight of the final scoring. And by that point, you've just exhausted so many parts of the game. I think
you're just exhausted.
And you're exhausted. I actually...
Like, it's been 5 hours. What is happening?
I actually think it's a really big problem, and I'm surprised that it didn't come up in playtesting because I understand that, because you're trying to trigger the scoring things in different piles of, if one pile or 2 piles are being neglected, and they shouldn't be because your asymmetric leaders should drive you to a different strategy, then, of course it's going to go on for a bit longer. But it's just that the games don't really play out in that style where you are equally drawing from all the cards. People want to do technologies first, and they really focus on buildings, and then the other things are kind of like, I don't need to do them, but I might do a couple, and then so for that reason it just never comes to an end. So I just wish that more thought had gone into that, particularly a 2-player count. I found it why is the card so far down into the deck?
But I think I loved my experience. Like every time I played, I love the experience of playing the game. I think I would not play it without house ruling it and bringing that, like making those cards come way sooner.
It's a simple house rule, but we need to review it as it's written. We like to review it as it's written in the rule book. The other 2 little things that I want to mention about this game is the lack of a score pad is almost unforgivable in this game.
It's such high numbers.
Yeah, it's so many numbers.
And so many different little things that you're going,
and you could easily forget to score a certain element. I know that the score pad came with the deluxe edition. I feel like that's something that should have been in the retail pack. And also some tokens to represent symbols that you gain in ways other than a permanent card. So sometimes it's like choose a couple of symbols that you get to have, but there's no tokens to track that. And why have those cards in there then? Because I'm not going to just remember that I've got 2 extra of a symbol. So that really frustrated me as well. I'm not sure if that was part of the deluxe package. But yeah, I don't think you need the deluxe edition though. Aside from for those elements, because I don't think it needed the minis. I was perfectly happy with the tokens.
Yeah, I agree.
But Mosaic, I really enjoyed it. Could have been a contender for a really high rated game for us. But in its current form, I gave it 7.1.
Oh, I gave it a 7.8 because I really enjoy it. But if it hadn't been so long to the point where it's like, why did you have to make me not want to play?
I'm surprised it's so high because
it would have been higher. Like this could have been way higher. So
this could have been a really high ranking game for us. But I'm just so disappointed at that end game.
The length.
Yeah. It's just it gets to the point where at the end of the game, no one is invested in who's winning anymore. And that to me is like you've sucked all of the air out of the end game.
It's just
that
like
makes it
such
fun.
a fun construction and stuff along the way, and then it's like the tension just dissipates to the point where people are like, I genuinely don't mind now. I just want this to stop. so why? But still solid game, just like House Roulette.
Such a solid
make
game
the end come in.
otherwise, and that's a really disappointing element. But that is our thoughts of Mosaic, and another 10 games from our collection.
Another 10 games.
So
done.
we're getting through them, and we're going to have more episodes of this throughout 2023. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy this series, please hit like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Drop us some comments below. Let us know which of these games you've liked and played or you disagree with. I feel like there might be a few disagreements.
And absolutely,
in
and
this
I expect
episode.
that. And I think like that. And again, it's just part of it. Like it's just what it's like. You love who you love.
Yeah, but I hope you got to know
our
our tastes a little bit better.
Yes.
So thank you for watching. We'll be back with more board game content soon. But otherwise, bye for now.
Bye.